Okay, hello everybody.
My audio cut out. Hold on, sorry, my audio cut out, so I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear what you're saying, Emily. Can you hear me? Can you put up a thumbs up if you can hear me? Oh, you can hear me, but I can't hear you now. All of a sudden, as soon as we went live, like your voice just went dead silent. That's really weird. Let me see if maybe it's something I can switch with the. Shoot. No, I need to be able to hear Emily. Should I? Okay, everyone else can hear me. So I'm seeing in the chat that everyone else can hear me, but I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just going to refresh one more time, Emily, and just come back in here so I can hear you. Is that okay? I also think that everyone could hear you. So yeah. I don't know. Can people hear Emily? Oh, they can't hear you either. Okay. So maybe it's something on your end, Emily. Or maybe you can jump back in. I don't know. All right. Well, if you want to try to figure that out, in the meantime, I'll just sort of do like a dance here and start the workshop. So, hey, everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. So, me and Emily, we're going to have some back and forth because we have like a little bit of an interesting story here with the workshop that I wanted to share. But maybe we'll wait until we could start to hear her. I don't know if you want to try some settings and then just keep talking, Emily, and I'll let you know if we can hear you at some point. Oh, she's leaving and coming back in. Hey, I see a lot of people out there that I recognize. I see GDG. I see Rory. Hey, Rory. Hey, Tabo. Hey, wow. Hey, Christine. Sweet. Lots of people in the audience. Hey,
Okay,
Emily's back.
are we good?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
There
So
we
I'm
go.
going to use my unfancy mic. And yeah, that's okay. I don't know what happened, but hi guys. Seems like you are very familiar with everyone in the chat, so very cool. We got Mr. Popular here. Hopefully you can't hear the background noise, but that's okay. I'll just mute myself when I'm not important, of which will be very soon. So we'll start over. Hi, introduction, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm Emily. I lead the DevRel team here at Scroll, but I'm here more to talk about learn everything I guess Dan has today about NFT rental marketplaces. I think you were introducing in the beginning that we discovered we actually have both built NFT rental marketplaces as tutorials, which I would say is like actually like I think it's a great example because just generally it is a spin on traditional NFT marketplaces that you see everywhere. I actually built it because I was feeling a really strong pain point at NFT NYC where all the parties were NFT gated. And I was like, can I just rent one for a day to go to this party? And then, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, the dog is coming. But okay, cool. Hopefully it's not too noisy. Don't bark, please. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you. So, like to give viewers a little bit of context here, Emily asked me what this workshop was going to be about, and I said to myself, hey, I want to build something that would be really cool and engaging for people that you would find really really fun, but also something where we can get into all the different skills that it takes to be a Web3 developer. So, like doing a little back end skills, doing a little front end skills, doing a little smart contract deployment and testing, all of that sort of stuff. And the rental marketplace came up as something I was like, this is really cool and interesting. And I was curious how you ended up there. It turns out that that was the first tutorial you built coming into the space, right, Emily? And so that was
yeah.
purely coincidental, which is quite cool.
Yeah, I joined right around when the ERC 4907, which is the rental NFT ERC, had just come out. So that was when I was like, "Ooh, what is this thing on Twitter that is whatever?" And I was like, "Let me build with it." So, yeah, excited to see the next iteration. You probably did it way better than I am. Let me tell you, I am a horrible like front-end engineer, like everything to do with like the NFT marketplace itself. I was like, I have no idea, but I can write the smart contract. And that's that's as
Yeah.
far as I got. But I don't know. I don't wanna keep talking. I wanna let you take it away, and we can dive into, like, actual code, which is way more important. So, I guess for the viewers who don't know, we're doing this together in celebration or midweek preparation for the Alchemy mini hack we're hosting with Scroll. So for those of you who don't know, um, Scroll and Alchemy just recently integrated, which is insane. I was so excited because Alchemy has an amazing developer community that we can activate on. As part of it, we're like, okay, yeah, let's just give a space for devs to do something crazy. So I think to that effect, the theme of this week's hackathon is like moonshot ideas, and like what are the craziest things you can build. I think yesterday I was talking with one of like the Alchemy scroll builders, the Gauntlet CTO, and he was like, "Yeah, the craziest app I've heard recently was like vape to earn." I was like, "Oh." Yeah, I remember. Speaking of NFTs specifically, there's a bong NFT like, where it's like a physical NFT that's attached to a bong, and then you can scan every time you smoke out of it, and you can see the whole history of who has, yeah, used that bong, and maybe I wanted to rent that. I don't know. But, yeah, for sure. It was cool. I'm really excited to see, I think, and learn from you because I haven't used Alchemy too much outside of just, the node provider, like, just connecting to the RPC endpoint. So,
Yeah,
which is super powerful, to be honest. I don't want to run my own nodes. Alchemy is great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a pain. I feel like it's always shutting down for one reason or another, and like, yeah, I mean, scaling up nodes is extremely difficult, but yeah. Cool. Yeah. So maybe what we could do is, so to kind of set the stage a little bit, just beyond what Emily was saying here as well, is that with rental NFTs, what I got excited about, I really think that we're going to see a resurgence of like interesting ideas around this. I think it's really cool that you came upon this rental NFT idea from like NFTs that have utility because they get you into certain events. I think that's a great place that you can rent NFTs. Also, NFTs that have utility like revenue sharing. So, like in Uniswap V3, for an example, you get NFT back when you provide liquidity to the pools. And so, those kinds of things are really interesting. Like, what would that be like if you were renting? One place is very different than another, right? It gets you into one place and you have like an offline system that checks that NFT versus Uniswap that's all on chain that's doing all that calculation. I also get really excited about games, and I think this would be a really interesting dynamic to games where you have like an item that can be used across many different worlds, and then you could like rent it from somebody for like a period of time. I think that'd be super sweet. So I think hopefully we'll start to see some really new, cool stuff on this, especially as we have awesome chains and we have super scalable infrastructure, and the dev tooling is getting so much better. That's what I want to show you guys today. I wanted to fully lean in on Scaffold Ether, which is just an awesome tool. We're really standing on the shoulders of giants these days to be able to use tools that people have created for us, not only Scaffold ETH, but then Hard Hat, which we're going to be using on the smart contract side. And then as well, I'm going to be leaning into full AI mode in this one. So whatever I feel like is going to be faster to ask ChatGPT to do for me, I'm going to have ChatGPT do for me, just to show you like how I think could make this really, really fast. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. So the first thing that I wanted to do was kind of share my screen over here and just talk about the top level architecture. I thought this would be kind of fun, and Emily, let me know if there's any trouble seeing this or anything. But I thought this would be kind of fun to talk about. First off, like when I told Emily that I was going to create a rental NFT marketplace, she told me that she had created one before, and I was like, that was super interesting to find out that we had both like shared interest in this same idea. And it turns out that she had a very different way of doing it. Like she mentioned, she had this standard called ERC 4907, which I'll pull up the spec in a moment. It's an extension of ERC 721. It's an extension of your typical NFT standard. And this turns out to be a much better way than what I was going to do. The way I was thinking about it is if you have ERC 721 And you want to, so the way that ERC 721 sort of looks is you have ERC 721, and then inside of there, you have a bunch of, so when you deploy an NFT, you're really deploying like an NFT collection, right? And then inside there, you have a bunch of token IDs. Those token IDs usually like start at 0, 1, 2. They kind of count up as you mint more of them. So you might have like quite a few of these token IDs inside of your ERC 721. Now, the way I was thinking about this, if we were going to do a rental marketplace, and the reason why I thought this was interesting is like, how would we set this up such that we can make it so any ERC 721 that already exists today, we can go ahead and rent it. So I was thinking what we would do is we would create like a rental agreement contract. And so I would call this like rental agreement, a rental, something like that. So basically what you could do is you could take one of these tokens, and these tokens could live inside of the rental agreement. So let's make it like the same color over here. Now, for those of you who already know smart contracts pretty well and you've gotten familiar with this, it's always a hard thing to think about, but the tokens themselves always sort of live inside of the ERC 721 contract, right? They're a mapping. That's really what they are when they're inside of the storage of the ERC 721 contract themselves. So they sort of map like a token ID to like who owns it, right? Some owner here. And maybe I'll just do an address. But this address is going to be this one over here, right? So it's going to live inside of the rental agreement. And the rental agreement would be some code such that when after a certain period of time and this expires, somebody could call back into it and say, hey, it's time to return the NFT. And I believe, Emily, you said that you actually worked on some like automation to make this work, right? Like when you
Yeah. So I was playing around with, if you guys are familiar with Gelato at all. So Gelato has smart contract automation. I was like, okay, how do I do this without having to worry about it? And yeah, they have all these like agents that constantly check. Um, but
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So in this case, you'd have something like a gelato, right? Like after the period is expired, right? Like it's plus 7 week or 7 days, something like that, whatever it is. You've rented something. Hey, it's time to return. So gelato calls in, and then that's going to make this NFT kind of go back to not to the contract, but really to the original owner, right? There's also like an owner contract in here that, or like an owner address, which could be like a contract or like an EOA. That might be an easier way to think about it. So it kind of, we could kind of think of ownership as being sort of this dotted line over here and dotted line over here. This isn't to say that the data itself moves into these contracts, but just that the ownership reflects this particular token here, right? So when Gelato calls back in Emily's case, this would move the owner back over here. Now, keep in mind, like I said, with Emily's case was actually more ERC 4907, which is what we're going to talk about today. This was just how I pictured that we were going to do with it. And I could tell you what the problems are with this as I was starting to implement it, why I thought that this was not as good of a way to do it. So yeah, so basically this is like how you would set it up, right? So we have this rental agreement. After 7 days, the token goes back over here. So this might be token 2. Token 2 goes back to the owner after it's been agreed upon. You'll also have kind of another stakeholder here who is sort of like in the terminology that we'll use today, which is what ERC 4907 uses. There's also this concept of the user, which we could also think of as like the borrower. And the borrower is the person who actually wants to borrow this token. Now, in this particular agreement here, right, the way that you see it is like the borrower would kind of be mapped to from the rental agreement. So they would even have like a copy of the token, right? There would be a mapping that points to the rental agreement. The rental agreement would own the token, and then the user would be pointed to from the rental agreement as the owner of that item. I know this seems complicated, and as I get into the code, it may seem a little bit simpler. I think it's really helpful to look at this from a high level. I think this is super complicated as compared to what we're going to see in a moment with 4907. because you essentially have this like setup where the rental agreement is sort of a proxy for the ownership of the user over here, and then it gets returned over here. The problem, we can't take out the rental agreement. If you're thinking like maybe we could just move this over here so that it could live inside of the user and then we could just forgo the rental agreement. The problem is if we just sort of hand it over to the user, they could just like do whatever they want with it, right? And we don't want them to be able to call back into the ERC 721, say, hey, transfer this to someone else. So we sort of need to create some smart contract logic that says, hey, this is going to live here, and then we're going to associate who actually gets to use this token for those 7 days. Now, a big part of this that's like, and Emily, I'd love your commentary here, is all of this lives on chain, right? So for the specific use case that Emily was talking about, so this whole dotted area is like the on-chain area. For this specific use case that Emily was talking about, you would need like a web application that sort of lives, or just like really any kind of application, right? But like, let's picture like a web application where you might have like typical web application might have, still getting used to this program, like a front end, maybe a back end, and maybe a database, right? So to have these like different components here, and this may be helpful to just call these out because we're going to be taking a look at these through today's. So you have like a server and then a DB. And this is kind of like your web application, right? So web application. Now the problem is the web application in this model, there's two problems with it, right? One is that if the web application just only knows about ERC 721s, in this case, they are not going to know anything about the rental agreement, right? They don't know to look for the rental agreement. Now, typically what you'd want to do in this case is you want to have like your database, your server and your database really watching the ERC 721 for events, so you can sort of cache a local copy of what's going on inside of your web application. So you can just sort of pull from the database whenever you need to, like who owns what NFT, and just update that as the NFT moves. Now you sort of need the web app to watch ERC 721, but you also need it to watch the rental agreement, right? You need to watch this other additional sort of thing where you have to have this concept of a secondary ownership, this user who kind of rents it, right? So now your web application has to have custom logic, and you can kind of imagine a rental agreement like Emily was talking about the concept of renting an NFT where you could scan it at different conferences. But if you're thinking about an NFT like a Uniswap V3 NFT, where that actually helps you like earn revenue share from a pool, that is going to need to have specific logic built into the rental agreement. So what ends up happening is you end up having like maybe many copies of these rental agreements, right? Where now this picture starts to get even more complicated. I can't even try to get rid of the text that I want to get rid of here, where all of a sudden you have multiple rental agreements. Now the web application has to start watching multiple rental agreements to see, hey, you know, this NFT belongs to this rental agreement. This NFT, maybe this one over here, belongs to this rental agreement, right? Something like that. And now it needs to watch all these different smart contracts to have an idea of, okay, there's owners of the NFT, and then there's users of the NFT. And in your specific use case, Emily, you would need to sort of have this idea of like the web application checking that you are the user of the NFT. Because if they just go to the owner, they're going to see that it's the EOA in this case, right? So that's kind of, you need adoption not only on the smart contract side, but also on the web application side to make either one of these work. But I think the problem with this approach, the way that I was going here, is that you sort of have these like rental agreements that can continue to grow and grow and grow. And you'd almost want to like create additional functionality for them as you need to like encode multiple rules on the blockchain there. So what we're going to talk about today that would be pretty similar, but it's going to be a little bit smoother, is going to be ERC 4907. So ERC 4907 is kind of similar to this ERC 721. It is an ERC 721. So like for those of you who are quite familiar with Solidity syntax, it inherits from ERC 721, right? So ERC 4907 is a 721. So we're going to have these token IDs over here. Oh my goodness. Get some of those tokens over here. There we go. So we get some tokens inside here, but the user owner distinction is actually going to live inside of ERC 4907 itself. So it's actually going to extend the functionality such that you just need to keep track of like which account is the owner and which account is the user. So we might have an owner over here, and then we might have the user, the borrower, but that's all going to be tracked inside of the token rather than being tracked somewhere else externally. And I thought that this was just a much smoother flow. So I ended up saying, let's go ahead and implement this rather than doing it the way that I was thinking to do with the rental agreement. So this is what you guys are going to see today, which is we're going to implement something with the token being inside of the owner's account. And then you're going to have it also tracking a user, the borrower, the person who is trying to, borrow in this case. We are also going to add like a marketplace where you can list your assets so that a borrower can come along and buy those or rent those assets from you. But at the end of the day, all of the data, the token stays in ownership of the EOA at all times. That way, ERC 721 in its functionality knows that only the owner can move this, only the owner can transfer this, but the user can sort of have like this additional privilege that might be baked into other web applications if they understand this differentiation of a user and an owner. Cool. All right. What did you think of that explanation, Emily? Is there anything that you'd add to it, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing, just like to add color here, is like kind of in the same way I guess in your first example, we would need all of these applications to kind of buy into the idea of rental agreements. There is a bit of still like the need for, I guess, web apps to buy into the fact that they can detect um that there is a user attribute or it is like an ERC 4907. But I think the cool thing about ERC 4907 and like overcoming this adoption barrier is, well, number one, it is an ERC. I built this tutorial probably over 2 years ago, so I'm a bit fuzzy on the details exactly, but I'm pretty sure like at least two of like the three major NFT marketplaces. So if you're looking at like OpenSea, Rarible, like those big names, I forget which one exactly. Like for users who are creating NFTs like through their UI, they actually had included rentable attributes as part of it. Right. So like having rentable NFTs on these huge marketplaces and the ability for people to do it and like recognize that this exists, I think makes it a much more powerful kind of type of contract to interact with, especially with regards to like, I guess, other projects knowing to use this. I think the other thing that was really interesting is I think so. I was able to use an Open Zeppelin standard. So Open Zeppelin built an ERC 4907. So
Oh,
I'm not sure how much of this you're doing from scratch, but at least from OZ side, right? It's like all audited. They have like the
yeah.
extension there. Um,
Oh, I'll be using Open Zeppelin for sure.
oh, perfect.
We don't,
Okay.
yeah, we don't have enough time to to do all this, but yeah, we'll ask AI to kind of speed through a lot of that as well. Um,
Yeah. No, I'm excited that you you adopted the new model. That's all I could ask for.
Yeah, so I think Emily said it really well. And this I don't think I hammered home well enough here, which is that even in this model, right, you're asking the web app to learn something new, which the web app may already know about ERC 721s. So the way you want to structure your web application is like if you're not using any sort of other indexing service, you want to make it so that your database can actually listen into different transfer events, right? So ERC 721 is going to emit a transfer event. And anytime that that gets emitted on the blockchain, you know that you need to update your database to reflect an ownership change, right? So now you can sort of build up an index for your web application of who all of those people are that own those NFTs. But on top of that, now what you're asking, which is what Emily was referring to, is you also have like this user change. I don't know what the event is either, but we'll take a look at it on 4907. They probably have something similarly name there, which is like user change. So now you're also keeping track of who the user is, right? And so like if you're a web application that listens for rentals, if you're a web application that like sort of buys into the standard, you would have to keep these two things sort of separate but also baked into your database. So you could say, is there a user? Yes, then they're the ones that can use this. Otherwise, fall back to the owner. The owner is the one that can use it. So yeah, all right, let's go ahead and jump on into it. So I didn't know that there was I would definitely use the one from Open Zeppelin if I could find it, but I did see we could just make use of Open Zeppelin's ERC 721. So this is the 4907 standard. You guys can find it out here on eips.ethereum.org and then look for 4907. And then if you come down here, there's like a reference implementation. What I'm going to do is pull this reference implementation into Scaffold ETH2, and then we're going to try to build as much as we can with the 30 minutes that we have left here, which is a tall order, right? We're going to do some smart contract development. We're going to do some front end stuff, but luckily, all much easier to do than when Emily was trying to do this for the first time 2 years ago. So we'll go ahead and pull this on in here as well. Yeah, let me just go ahead and create a Scaffold ETH2 repository, and then we will go from there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just pull up iTerm and create
Do you want to switch to, I guess, maybe sharing your window or something?
Oh, thank you. Okay, there we go.
Your screen.
Window. There we have it. Thanks, Emily. Cool. So I'm just going to go into iTerm, and I have like these temp repos where I'm always creating.
Oh no, you're sharing your Win ID. Sorry, let me rephrase. You should share your screen so we can see. I'm assuming you're pulling up like a CLI or something like that.
That's so funny. When you said window, I just said to myself, "Oh, window. Yeah, that makes sense." Okay.
No, sorry, I tricked you.
They're all windows and screens and apps and okay.
Yeah.
All right, temp repos. So what I'm going to do is let's call this fun time here. I also brought a prop today, which I think I'm going to get a use of here in a moment. So this will be super fun here. So let's go ahead and create this. I'm going to pull this up into something that if you guys haven't tried this, it's totally awesome. It's called Cursor AI, and it's basically it's VS Code, but baked in like a bunch of AI tools. So you can do things like ask the AI to like edit some of your code. You could do things like diffs. So it kind of feels like when you're developing in Cursor AI, like you're just like a human with a bunch of little AI developers running around and you're just like merging their pull requests. That's what it feels like to me. And that's kind of like what we're going to see here. So actually, let me just go ahead and plop in Scaffold E2 here real quick. And we'll do this. And we'll put that into the fun time repo. So I'm going to clone that in there, and then we'll open this back up into Cursor AI. Sweet. So now we have this here. So you can see it looks very similar to VS Code for anyone who's familiar with VS Code. But then additionally, you get these sort of like side windows where you could chat with ChatGPT, like, are you ready for live streaming? I like to let ChatGPT know when we're going to be doing something because I just feel like it's courteous. So it says it's ready. So let's go ahead and do it. So with Scaffold ETH2, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. You get basically this thing that's set up where you have a hard hat backend for your smart contracts, really. And then you also have a Next.js application where we can do some like front end stuff. You could set up some routing, things like that. So the first thing that I really need to do here for this rental marketplace is just set up the smart contracts the way that we talked about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull over ERC 4907 from over here, the reference implementation, and we'll drop it in here, and we'll call this ERC 4907. Now, I don't like that error that I saw. Hard hat couldn't be initialized properly. Hopefully my plugin's working okay. Okay, so one thing that we do need to do is we need to install Open Zeppelin contracts because right now I don't have those installed in my repository by default. So I am going to need to go in here and then go to packages, hard hat, and then npmi Open Zeppelin contracts.
Oh, there's a question. Oh, okay,
yeah.
but it got answered. Is this a VS Code extension or Cursor IDE?
Yeah, Cursor IDE is I think so. It's like a separate. Oh, unable to resolve. It's a oh shoot. I should be using Yarn. That's why it's a completely separate IDE. I mean, it's like built with VS Code. I don't know too much about their development practices, but yeah, I think of it as a completely different IDE, Cursor IDE. You can find it. I think Cursor AI is probably like or cursor.com it looks like they have now. Pretty cool, and you could just get jumping right into it, and I'll show you some good features with it as we get along. So you do have to use Yarn inside a scaffold, otherwise it gives you some issues, as you saw there. So I'm going to let that go ahead and install, and while that's doing it, we're just going to take a look at ERC 4907 here. So ERC 4907 you can see is an IERC 4907. I'm actually not going to use the interface here just because I don't need it. But you know, if you were actually implementing this, you would want to keep the interface there so that it becomes easier to for other things to interface with this if they only have the interface. But we have the actual contract here, and I just want to keep this simple. So at the top level, you have this struct with a user. And so the user is the one that I was talking about. This is the borrower, the person who's actually borrowing the NFT for a period of time. And then you have this expiration, after which point you could add some automation, like Emily was talking about, to be able to do something after that expires. But you also don't have to, which is kind of cool about this standard, because you have this expires date. And after that is complete, when you call into user of right here, you could see this function right here. You could call into it, and if it's expired, it's just going to return you address 0. But if it's not expired, it'll return you the user here. So you could also just call this function at any time, and it'll tell you the proper state, because the block timestamp is going to be this global that's going to be in here, right? This is not like a pure function. This will change over time. So we kind of have that block timestamp variable that's going to sort of set this for us automatically. So hopefully now that has installed, and I don't think for whatever reason everything is coming in quite properly, which is unfortunate. It said my hard hat repository was not initialized correctly, so I don't think I'm going to get any sort of help here from the IDE, which is unfortunately that happens sometimes. I know that happens VS Code sometimes too, but so if there's some issues here, it's not going to tell me. So we'll just have to go into hard hat and say npx hard hat compile and see what the issues might be. I do think we're going to have a couple in here. Okay, so the first one here, and this is tough. This standard right here, I think was taking the possibility of this is approved or owner was something that ERC 721, some implementations may have already had in there. But in this case, ERC 721 from OpenZeppelin, at least the 5.0 version, which normally I can navigate to, doesn't have that built in there. So let's see what we could use instead. So it doesn't have that is approved or owner, but maybe we could use some other methods that will get us like the same thing. So let's see what we got here. Okay, so there's like an owner of, and then there's a get approved for a particular token ID. So we're just going to have to replace that down here. So we'll say owner of, and then this is going to take in the token ID, and then is equal to message sender there. You can see the AI is kind of doing some of this for me, but approved, get approved, and then token ID is equal to message sender. That's going to be the same functionality there for us. So we can go ahead and grab those out of the ERC 721. And then we had a couple other compilation issues here. We'll just have to fix for the standard. So this is the event that I was talking about that you would want to listen into on your database to make sure that you are updating the user as it goes along. I'm not going to use it in this example, so I'm just going to go ahead and take it out. It looks like it wasn't defined there. And then the other thing it's going to get mad at me is for this supports interface. This is a really good method for anyone who's trying to check if your contract is a 4907. I'm also not going to use this in this case, so I'm just going to take it out, just keep things really simple. And the last thing here that's broken, oh no, I think that's it. All right, can we compile now? Update user. This one here. Sweet. Bummer. Okay. So it's saying before token transfer is not found. I do think that this is also something that's changed in the latest version of Open Zeppelin's reference implementation. So unfortunately, with like a lot of these internal methods, even though we took the reference implementation from the standard, these were using the ERC 721 internal methods, and I don't think they have this hook anymore. This hook before token transfer is meant to, anytime that you do a token transfer, whether it's a mint, a burn, or transfer from one person to another, it's going to call this, and you can see that it's going to run the ERC 721 logic here. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and delete the user mapping for the token ID, which is going to set this back to 0. This is important, so we do want to keep this in here, but we're going to have to use something else here to make this work. So you can see here, there's this transfer from method, and in here, there's like an update. This update is going to happen everywhere. So in a mint, a burn, and transfer, this update is going to happen in all those cases. So we might be able to make use of this one here and then be able to pull that in and use this instead of using the hook. I'm not sure if that's a recommended way of doing it, but in the absence of this hook, we'll go ahead and do that here. So we could say function update, and then it looks like it's giving me everything I want. That's pretty close. So we do want to call super update and then pass all this through. But then the other thing we want to do is this deletion here and just make sure that that's all tracked properly. Okay, awesome. So let's do that. Again, I'm not getting any help from the IDE here, so I'm just going to have to compile. That would make things a little faster. Okay, it's giving me a problem because this from isn't defined. But if we go into the update, we could see that from is the owner here. So it's whoever was sending the token before. So we can go ahead and get that from. And that's going to now, so basically it's saying if the from is not equal to the to, whoever we're sending this to, and the address isn't already set to 0, we're going to delete this here, which is basically going to set that address back to 0. So this user's mapping is going to be, so basically what this means at a high level is anytime that somebody transfers the NFT, we're going to delete the rental information. So that's also something you'll probably want to bake into your marketplace, and we'll talk about that as we get into the marketplace code, is you want to think about what if somebody in the middle of the rental moved the token, because you don't want to get rid of that functionality. I mean, I suppose you could, but because we're extending ERC 721 too, it may make sense to just allow the things you would expect in ERC 721 to do. And blocking a transfer like that is a little non-standard, but maybe something that you'd want to do. You could like override those methods. Let's go ahead and see if we can compile this now. Okay, so it's getting mad because it looks like it returns address in the update inside of ERC 721. So we're just going to want to go ahead and return an address here too. The address that we're going to want to return is the one that comes from this update here. So let's just take the result. Actually, let's just name it over here, and then we'll return it right here. How about that? Cool. Okay, so this is everything that I wanted to do for 4907 if it compiles. Awesome. All right, now I think we're going to get into the swing of things, which is good because we got a lot to do here. All right, item.sol. Now this is where we can really pull it in the chat over here and really have us help us build something cool. So you get this little like context window where you can say like, I want to add something to the context so you know about these different files. You can even ask it to like send it to the whole code base, which would parse all your files. But in this case, I just want it to create an item that is an ERC 4907 that has a public mint function that automatically increases a count and then mints an item of that count. Cool. So that seems basically what I want. Let's go. Here we go. Sweet. Oh man, it's rewriting the whole 4907. No, don't do that. No. Create an item contract that inherits 4907 that has a public mint function. Oh man. Oh no. Come on. I swear it's normally faster for me to do this with AI than myself, but in this case, I wonder if it would have been faster if I did it myself. Here we go. All right, sweet. So now you can see it's giving me a token count. It has this constructor. We're going to want to pass along our name and symbol to the item, or I guess we could take it in from the front end. Yeah, this might have been faster for me to write myself, but that wasn't too bad. So you can see we have this public mint function that is taking a token count that we created, and then it's going to go ahead and mint to the person who called this function and then increase the token count. So the first time the token count will be 1, and then 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Maybe so that we don't have to pass in anything on the constructor, I'm just going to name this item. And then maybe ITM, something like that. Cool. All right, sweet. So that's going to do it for the item. And then we need to create a marketplace. And then we want a quick. So for the marketplace, I was thinking about this beforehand, and I thought it would be fun to name this something where you go to get rentals. And I don't know about you guys, but near me when I was a kid, to get rentals, I would go to Blockbuster. And I think that's a pretty cool name for something that lives on chain, Blockbuster. So I thought that would be a pretty fun thing. And so my prop for the day too, if you could still see me here, is I got a Blockbuster shirt. I'll put it on once we deploy.
This is amazing. What?
So I thought that would be kind of fun. I'll put the Blockbuster shirt on once we get this deployed on chain, and then we'll have it officially out there. So let's go ahead and do that. So for the Blockbuster, AI, I think, is really going to save me in terms of time this time. So don't let me down, ChatGPT. So let's go ahead and ask it to build Blockbuster. So build a contract Blockbuster. I want to give it some more context here. So the context that I want to give it is 4907. I also want to give it item. So build a contract Blockbuster that is a rental NFT marketplace. It should have 2 functions. The 2 functions should be list, which is going to allow a person, the owner, to list the NFT for rental for a particular price, passed in as an argument. So 2 arguments, I suppose, there. And then a function rent, which is going to allow another person to rent the NFT and become the user of that NFT. They have to pay in the amount from the listing, and that value goes to the owner. Now, a smart thing to do might be to pay the owner at the end of the rental, because like I said, during the transfer, it's going to delete all the rental information. So that might be a good thing left to the reader to also add in there, or maybe we could change it as we go. Let's see if we can get this correct. All right, so we got that. Let's see, we got a listing that has an owner, price is listed. That's pretty good. Item contract. Okay, so it's going to use the item contract address. This is going to be a specific, this contract right here. Let's go ahead and copy it, and then I'll show you what I'm referring to here. This one that it just made me, I don't know why I had the triple ticks there, but this one that it just made me, it took in the contract address for the NFT. So this particular Blockbuster is going to be specific to this item contract address. So if you wanted a more big Blockbuster that could do multiple NFTs, then we just wouldn't pass in an item contract address here. And in the listing and the rental, you would pass in the NFT in that case. But this one's going to be specific to this item contract address, which is fine. I think that's okay. So let's go ahead and do that. This looks pretty good to me. So we have a listing. That's when somebody lists the NFT. There's going to be an owner and a price. And then there's going to be a set of listings mapped to the token ID. And because we're specific to the contract, in this case, the particular NFT collection, the token ID is going to be the key identifier here for each one of the listings. So it's going to check that the owner of the token ID is the only one who can list the NFT. Then it's going to create a listing. And then for rent, it's going to check the listing. And if it's listed, then it's going to allow them to go ahead and do this as long as they pass in enough to pay for it. then it's going to go ahead and transfer the value over to the listing owner. It's going to set us as the user, and then the listing is no longer listed. That's pretty good. I think there's some issues there potentially. Maybe like the owner could relist again. Maybe after the rental has taken place, they could put up another listing before the person. Yeah, there's some timing issues there, but this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. So let's go ahead and just make some tests and make sure that this is working properly. First, let's go ahead and compile, because I just want to see that this is even compiling okay. But I feel like ChatGPT did a good job for us. And now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and just test this out. So we have this test over here. And again, this is another good thing that AI is going to be super great for, is we're just going to test Blockbuster. So let's make sure that it's working the way we expect. We want to write some tests. So let's say, please help me write a test for the rental marketplace Blockbuster. It should, okay, it should deploy the item collection, mint an item to the deployer, and then allow the deployer to list that item. Then once they've listed the item, then someone should be able to rent the item. Once that person rents the item, they should become the user of the item. Check on the item contract, right? We have that user of function. And then the other thing that should happen is once this rent occurs, then we should see that the value is transferred to the owner, the original owner, right? We should make sure that that happens too. Check that the value, and then speed up the blockchain by 7 days. Or how long did we do the rentals for? Oh, this is something, okay, hold on. Let's come back over here. This is something that I did not program in here, is we'll also want to, we're also going to want to put an expiry on how long that this is set up for. Okay, here's the expires. Oh, it's being taken in on the rent side. So we're actually allowing the renter to decide how long it's going to be. Let's just go ahead and ask AI, can you change it so expires is always 7 days? So you can actually like have it come in on just like a couple lines of code, and it'll go ahead and change it there. So it took out the argument for expires. And then you could see that it's doing expires is now the block timestamp plus 7 days. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay, cool. So we're always going to rent 7 days, which I think was the standard rental for Blockbuster anyway. So there we go. Okay, we'll come back in here. I'll type out everything I had before. Speed up the blockchain by 7 days. And then now the user should be set back to the 0 address. All right. Cool. All right, we got like 15 or like 10 minutes left, just over 10. So let's see how fast we can get this through. So I don't expect this to be perfect. If you guys have used AI for like Web3 stuff, you'll know that there's a lot of like versioning issues oftentimes. So there's probably going to be a couple things that go wrong, but let's just see how close it got to it. Okay, so first of all, the type chain types in Scaffold Ether, they come in when you compile. So it's quite possible that maybe it's not up to date with some of the latest. Oh, wait a minute. Rental marketplace. Oh, did I not give it enough context? I don't think I gave it enough context. I think I did the context. So you could see that I didn't give it context of the other files. So it didn't know enough in this particular chat to actually like know the names of the files there. So we're going to have to redo this. So we're going to give it blockbuster.sol. We're going to give it 4907. Yeah, I think that should be fun. Oh, and the item. We want to do the item too. All right. This time it should be a little more. So now it's actually pulling in the Blockbuster from type chain types and the item. These things don't exist, right? And fortunately with Scaffold, it'll generate like the TypeScript stuff that you need to go and like type check all of your contracts. So we kind of caught that before we went any further, which is super nice. So let's go ahead and just program that in there. Now it's giving me a couple issues. Let's go ahead and close out a couple of these things just to look at these. Yeah, this is the type of stuff that you typically see that it does wrong, is like a lot of the stuff that's like promisey or sometimes isn't necessary is in here. I think because we're auto mining in test cases, we don't need these deployeds. Those will be fine. And then sometimes the address isn't there on the item itself. So this is a contract that's being deployed. You have to like do like get address, and then that is a promise. So we're going to want to do that. Yeah, and then it has Ether's versioning issues. So this is now, please use the latest version of Ethers, which I'm sure we have installed 6.13. So let's see. Okay, sweet. So it's just parse Ether on the Ethers there, which now we can just go ahead and adjust those. It's helping me do that there. And then this one actually, I know, became 0 address. So you run into some versioning issues, but otherwise, I think this did everything we wanted it to, which is deploy the item factory, the blockbuster factory, and then it checks the initial ownership of the item, which should be the owner's address. It lists it on the marketplace for 1 Ether. Somebody else comes along, the renter, and rents it for 1 Ether. And then we check that the value is transferred to the owner. So now they should have that much. Check that the renter is the user of the item. And then we increase the time of the blockchain and then check that the item reverts back to the 0 address, because now they are no longer renting the item, right? So let's just go ahead and test that that's working. Well, why? Make sure your node is running. Do I need to run it on a node? I would have thought tests would have happened. All right. I mean, we could run a node, but
Does hard hat automatically bring up a?
Yeah. Oop. Unsupported. Only hard hat is. Okay, that's weird. I would have thought, yeah. So there's like kind of a concept in hard hat where you could do like an in memory blockchain node, where I would have thought by default it would have just ran with that, but maybe I guess because of the default network is set to localhost, maybe we'll just run. So I know at the top level here, there's like a npm run chain, which is going to run the chain for this. And I guess we'll run that. I would have thought the test, because you wouldn't want the test to run on a chain that's like running in the background, because then, you know, variables will change over time. So I would have thought by default it would have ran on just the in-memory node, but we'll go ahead and test that out. Okay, let's see. Can I move this out? Oh my goodness. Sorry, this is move into a new window. Oh, not like that. Okay. Yikes. All right, let's do this. New terminal. And then we'll rerun that. Packages, hard hat, npx hard hat test. Okay, let's see how we did. So we got an issue which says transfer caller is not owner or approved. Okay. How are we doing on time? 5 minutes. Man, we're not going to have enough time for the front end. I think it took too long on the sketching, but I'll show you guys. We'll get the front end up and running just to get it, but I won't be able to like program in any of the buttons of the UI. So should deploy the item collection, mint an item, list it, rent it, and then it's saying that reverted with the reason 4907 caller is not owner approved, and this is happening right here. So at this point, I think what we need to do is we need to actually give approval to the marketplace to be able to, because we have that is approved or is owner. So we need the ability for Blockbuster to be able to move the user, set the user over to the renter in this case. So it's throwing on this line, and we have that that piece of code that we put into 4907, which is we're only allowing the owner of the token ID or the person who has approval. So if you're familiar with this concept, there's like an approved transfer from flow. This approval makes use of the same thing, where we can approve for somebody to be able to like set the user. And so in this case, we need Blockbuster to be able to have that approval to be able to set the user. So what we want to do is we want to have like basically, let's ask it to generate, give Blockbuster approval from the owner to for this particular item. So let's go ahead and see it there. All right, sweet. That looks pretty good. So we're going to give it the ability to approval on this one right here. And you can see that one is the same across the board. It's the token ID. So we're just testing the one token ID there. Let's go ahead and run this and see that we're actually testing this properly. Okay. And we have one last issue, which is right here at the end. Blockbuster TS 51. So this is the line fit. The only thing that's failing now, everything else that was working, the only thing that's failing now is at the end, it's not getting set back to the 0 address. And I wonder if that's just because we increased it by 7 days, but not like more than 7 days. It might have been just like a second too short. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Sweet. So just got to do. You can't be right on that 7-day mark. You gotta expect the rental back 7 days plus 1 second. Okay. Cool. So that's our contracts. And if we want to deploy them, this is basically what. And this is a good time to wrap it up here. I don't want to keep us over, but we could do npx hard hat deploy. And what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and oh no, there's one more thing. Okay. This deploy script also needs to be set up so that we can deploy our contracts. Right now it's deploying the initial contract. Again, another thing that I think will speed up by just adding ChatGPT in here. This is going to be the main takeaway from the workshop here. I didn't know it was going to be such a focus, but I'll go ahead and put these in here. And then let's say rewrite this deploy script so that we deploy the NFT the item collection mint to the deployer. Then we deploy Blockbuster pointed at the item collection, right? Because it takes in an address. That should be everything that we really need it to do. So that will come in just a second. You can see that it's deploying the item collection. And then it is minting to the deployer. And then we're plugging into Blockbuster the item address, which again, it's not getting the promises correct. So we'll just have to make sure to update that. But other than that, it's pretty good. So let's see here. So deployer is giving me an issue. Why? Because I don't know why it wants a second argument there. It should only take one argument for get contract at. And then the other thing that's going to be an issue is this item address is not the item address. It would be await.get address. And we'll look for, maybe item deployment would have an address. I don't know. I guess we could try that. Because that's actually like the deploy and then there's like a deploy function. Okay, so I don't know enough as to whether or not that'll work. That might actually be okay. So let's go ahead and deploy this and see what we get. Awesome. Looks like it worked. Okay, so this is where we can wrap it up. Unfortunately, I didn't get enough time to do the front end, but maybe we could create like a separate video or something and show you guys the front end. Thanks for sticking with me even through some of the problems here. But what we could do is once this is deployed, the really cool thing about Scaffold ETH, and we're not going to get to see too much on the front end, unfortunately, but the really cool thing about Scaffold ETH is that it will actually go ahead into Next.js and it will drop everything you need about the contracts to be able to interact with them on the front end in a place that's already baked into the Scaffold ETH like functionality, all the hooks and everything that you would need on the front end so that you could go ahead and start interacting with that. And we can actually see this if we go up to the top and we say npx hard hat or npm run start is the command to do it. If you run start here, this is going to start up our local host, and we'll actually have access to these contracts that we've created together out here in localhost land. So let's let that spin up real quick. It might be installing some dependencies. Okay, there we go. Cool. Oh, I should have, while I took time to stall, I should have put on the Blockbuster shirt, right? Because I said once that goes on chain, we'll put on Blockbuster. That's the That's the big win right there. All right, cool. So for debug contracts, this already has it baked in, which is super cool of Scaffold ETH that they have this in here. And you can see we have our blockbuster. And what we could do is we could, do everything that we need to do from this side as well, which is we could check our balance. So if we're the deployer, and I know the deployer is actually account 5 is the first hard hat account right here. So I'm actually going to switch over to this one real quick. And then we'll just check our balance. So you can see that I got minted 2 tokens, right? So the balance is 2 for me for this particular item. And if I were and then you could check like the token ID 1, the user of that is currently 0. Oh, nope, it's sending me somewhere. And then you could see that the owner of token ID 1 is me. So if we were going to redo everything on the front end that we did on the back end, then what we would need to do is we need to approve Blockbuster just to rent our item, right? So if we were to take Blockbuster's address over here and we wanted to give them the ability to rent our item, we would go ahead and do this. And then we can confirm that. And we could see it was successful, which means that now this should be listed somewhere. So we can come over to Blockbuster and we should be able to, now that this is approved, we should be able to list this, right? So we should be able to do something like, let's list this for 4 Ether. And so we'll go ahead and list that up there and we'll send that through. And then once that's listed, somebody else should be able to come along and they should be able to rent it, right? So now if we switch over to account number 4 here, which we can do like this, switch to this account. Now that's the one that's up here, 0xDF1F. We can go ahead and rent that for the 4 Ether here, send that through. Oh, I don't have enough. So I just need to ask the faucet for some Ether, which makes sense, right? We're sending enough that we can rent this here. Let's get the 4 Ether plus some gas. So now we got 5 Ether. We go ahead and send this through. I don't think it's processed it yet, but I got the 5th one. Oh, come on. It says 4, but I know I have 5. Come on, give it to me. There we go. Sweet. Okay, so now we can rent this. And hopefully that had gone through successfully. Maybe that was my notification. And if that went through successfully, then we have this user here of this token should now be updated, right? So if we go here to the token ID, there's the user is this one here, and the owner would be the original one here. So if we read that, just to prove it to you, if I do 0, it should be non-existent token, right? Because we started with 1. And if I go back to 1, you can see the owner is the original owner, but the user is the person who is renting this. And if we sped up the blockchain, then we could see, Emily, I'll speed up the blockchain. Do you have a second for me to do that? Or
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right,
I
let's
have
speed up
infinite time for you.
Infinite time. Whoa. Okay. Let's speed up the blockchain real quick just to prove to ourselves. I would love to. So with Scaffold Ether too, the really cool thing here is when you actually get into building the UI yourself, you could start to use some of their hooks and they bake in like the contracts into the hooks. So you could use things like use Scaffold read contract and use Scaffold write contract to actually write the functionality that we're kind of seeing in debug contracts. So that's something that I'll leave to the reader just in the interest of time here. But what we could do is we could just speed up the blockchain here so that we could see that the user gets reset to 0 there. So that's another thing that we could sort of come over here to our hard hat. And there's these scripts over here. And let's call this like speedup.ts. And hard hat has these different things that you could send to its JSON RPC that are like special methods that you can use to kind of configure the chain, your local chain. So one of those is that you could, and we saw this in the tests, right? We saw this ability to be able to speed it up, EVM increase time. We basically want to do that to our local node and just go ahead and increase it by some period of time. So let's just ask it to do this. Can you write a quick script for hard hat to speed up the blockchain by 7 days? So we can run it in our scripts here. I don't know why I added that last part. All right, yeah, that looks perfect to me. So it's going to use ethers and it's going to speed it up by 7 days. We'll do EVM increase time, EVM mine. Now we should be able to run this with npx hard hat run. Oh, we got to be inside of the packages hard hat. I'm sure there's like a top level command for it too, but we can say npx hard hat run script / speed up, and nope, it needs the .ts. All right, blockchain time increased by 7 days, and if it was, then we go back to token ID 1 and we read it, and there you go. The rental has returned, right? And if you were kind, you would rewind. That is it.
Wow, this is amazing. This is actually super helpful. Just like from the perspective of I didn't know about the AI and watching people like live streams I like because I like watching people debug. I think that's the most important part. And I'm like, oh, you're God mode. I feel like I would be sitting here being like, okay, click, click, click. Google
Yeah.
search, why is this broken? And then you just know. Unless all of those errors were planned. Then
How much did I plan? Well, the AI is like kind of non-deterministic, right? It like
right.
spits out things that I wasn't expecting. So some of those were definitely not planned, but
Yeah, yeah. We had a few questions that I kind of addressed. So the first question was, I was wrong. It's actually not an open Zeppelin, unfortunately. I remember looking for an open Zeppelin. I think the answer is people made requests for it, like in the GitHub issues, but it wasn't resolved. But that's fine because now we have this wonderful tutorial here by Dan. Is this recorded? The answer is yes. It's kind of like everywhere. So if you want to see it on the scroll side, it's actually through our platform Level Up. So it's youtube.com/at level up in web3. I'm not sure what the alchemy slug is.
Hmm.
But you could probably just look up alchemy rental NFT and you'll find it. Or maybe Google rental NFT and you'll find my old article. It's actually I checked, it's still on the first page. Um, but
We
it's
should get that out there. That was
yeah,
really good. Emily
it's
did an awesome job on this 2 years ago. Mm.
yeah, yeah, back when I was on Truffle. Unfortunately, that is sunset. But totally fine. This was super interesting. Is there a GitHub to review?
I can make one. I will send that out. I wonder what the best place to put like a centralization of resources would be, Emily, because then we could also share your article. That would be cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
I mean, I think for the time being, just like probably in your GitHub is best, and I can send you my article. You can put in the README, and then the next step would be I can make a PR into our website, levelup.xyz, where we're going to be consolidating kind of every educational like learn thing that Scroll has done over time. So there'll be multiple surfaces, but for now, I think the easiest way is just put in your GitHub PR, GitHub
yeah.
repo. We'll share it. Unless there's like an Alchemy repo, that's fine too. Um, and that will be there. If you guys aren't in the Telegram group for Level Up, join that. And then that's kind of where all that information will be pushed. So I'll also just go ahead and add this to I can show this on screen, levelup.xyz. Head there. That's where you should find the Telegram information, join the group chat. It's also where you can register for the hackathon, also submit your projects. And yeah, I mean, I guess Dan, last piece is how do we get connected with either like Alchemy, you, or relevant channels, Discord?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go to Alchemy University, you're going to find resources kind of similar to what I did here, but just much slower and baked out in the courses. There was so much more I wanted to go into here than
yeah.
time to allow to go into it. You could also find me on Twitter, being Dan Nolan. It's kind of like a play off of Being John Malkovich, was a really weird movie. Just
I feel like we're all dating ourselves right now. Like, I know what you're talking about, and I'm like,
yeah,
I
I got a
know what
Blockbuster shirt
Blockbuster
on.
is. But I can't say everyone knows what Blockbuster is
Yeah,
or any of yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like these old people.
I hope it's this Dan Nolan with 2 N's.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
that's it.
cool,
Mhm.
being Dan Nolan.
You found me, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining. This was super helpful. Um, it was such a pleasure watching you I don't wanna say struggle, learn, succeed click around really fast. I was like, "Holy shit, this is amazing." I have a new aspiration. My 2025 goals is to debug as fast as Dan. Um,
I was getting scared because I was like, "There's not much time left." So, like, I found myself like, "I don't know if I have enough time to explain what I'm doing right now."
oh no, someone said, "What's Blockbuster?" I hope they're playing. If you guys don't know, it was back when Netflix was, not around, and it was a physical VCR, video rental tapes kind of place. I think
Yeah.
they did get to DVD
I
stage.
liked it for the video games.
Oh,
I liked to play a lot of those as a
yeah.
kid. Super Nintendo ones were fun.
Crazy. Oh my god. Um, cool. I mean, otherwise, next steps, take this, all the learnings here, build on Scroll plus Alchemy. I guess we never actually got to the part of how do you even build on Scroll and Alchemy because we did
I
everything in
know.
a local
Yeah.
test train. Um,
So if you go into Scaffold, by the way, and I should have mentioned this at the end, I was hoping to deploy to testnet. I was going to write a few things on the front end, deploy to testnet, and it was all going to come together. But if you go into Scaffold on the back end and on the or inside the smart contracts and on the front end, you'll see there's like a Scaffold config on the front end, and on the back end there's the hard hat config, and you could just plug in your Alchemy API key. It's already all in there, and you'll also see in the hard hat config they already have the RPC set up for Scroll for Scroll Sepolia and also Scroll. So that's all baked in there. I don't know who did that. Maybe Emily, maybe you did that. I don't know if you put in the PR, but
no, I didn't. The
yeah,
Scroll community is just super.
they're
Um,
all over it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they got it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everybody for joining. I hope to see some, I don't know, rental submissions. That's a pretty like moonshot idea, I would say, because it's not common. I haven't heard it that often.
Yeah.
So please revive it. Make Urban Zeppelin create a standard for ERC 4907
Yeah.
through the power of Dan.
Let's revive Blockbuster, bring it back. It was
Yeah.
always meant to be an on-chain name. I mean, Blockbuster, come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I can't believe you have a shirt. I don't know. Like, did you buy that or did you just have it already?
So funny story, we had like a Y2K party, Alchemy offsite, and I bought it for that because I thought it was Y2K-ish. I don't know what Y2K means, but it's like that seems like the right theme. I don't know. So
Yeah, I don't know. It's cool. It's vintage. I feel compelled to buy
yeah.
one now. Um, okay. Well, that is
Cool.
everything. I know there's some lag always with live streams. So I'm going to count down from 10 and we're just going to stare at each other until I finish. And then I'll hit end stream and we will be good there. So
Cool.
10, 9,
Do your
8,
best stare face.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. You guys lost your time to ask questions. But again, check out levelup.xyz, follow Alchemy, follow, I guess, Level Up Web3 on Twitter. And yeah, build, build, build.